All right, let's jump right in. We're going to do a deep dive into quantitative research, what it is, how it actually works, and why it's such an incredibly powerful tool for making sense of the world around us.
So, we're going to start at the very beginning. I mean, the real beginning. Before we get into all the numbers and the stats, we have to talk about the philosophy, the core beliefs that actually drive this whole way of thinking.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. Quantitative research is all about having a system. It's a structured way of taking the things we observe in the world, turning them into numbers, and then using statistics to find patterns and test our ideas. It's how we move past just a gut feeling. And at the heart of it all is this hunt for an objective, measurable truth. But this is where it gets really interesting, because it turns out that how you define truth comes down to a choice, a philosophical choice. And that leads us to two major, kind of different worldviews.
So on one hand, you have positivism. This is the classic view. It basically says reality is out there and we can measure it perfectly. We just need the right tools to get that one true number. But then there's post-positivism. It's a bit more, cautious. It agrees that there's a real world out there, but it also says, hey, we're human, our tools aren't perfect, so our measurements might be a little flawed. So instead of looking for one perfect number, post-positivists use something called triangulation. That's just a fancy word for looking at a problem from multiple angles to get a better, more robust answer.
So, with that philosophy in mind, what are the actual rules of the game? Well, any good piece of quantitative research is built on 5 key features. Think of these as the non-negotiables.
These are basically the quality control checklist. First, objectivity. You got to use standardized tools to keep your own biases out of it. Second, measurement. That's the magic of turning an idea into a number. Third, hypothesis testing. You make a specific prediction and then you see if the data backs you up. Fourth, generalizability. This is huge. It asks, do my results from this small group actually apply to the wider world? And finally, replicability. This one's crucial. You have to explain your method so clearly that another scientist could come along, repeat your study, and get the same results. You got to show your work.
Okay, now we're getting practical. Let's talk about the actual building blocks of a study. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with 2 things, variables and hypotheses. This table breaks it down perfectly. The independent variable, or IV, is the thing you, the researcher, change or manipulate. It's the cause. In this case, it's the type of feedback. The dependent variable, the DV, is what you measure to see if there was an effect. Here, that's the writing score. Then you have control variables, which are all the things you keep the same to make sure it's a fair fight. And sometimes you'll see a moderator. That's a variable that can change how strong the relationship is, like maybe student motivation affects how well the feedback works.
But hang on a second. How do you measure something fuzzy like learner engagement? You can't just point a ruler at it, right? This is where a super important step called operationalization comes in. It's the process of taking an abstract idea and defining it in a way that is concrete and, most importantly, measurable. It's how you get from a vague concept to actual data.
So let's take that learner engagement idea. You could measure it by looking at behaviors, like how many times a student logs into a portal, or you could measure their emotions using a motivation survey, or you could even get at their thought processes with a questionnaire. See? You're breaking down one big idea into smaller, specific things you can actually count.
Now, at the core of pretty much every study is this battle between 2 competing ideas. You start with the null hypothesis. Think of this as the skeptical default position. It says nothing is going on here, no difference, no effect. The researcher's actual prediction is the alternative hypothesis. The whole point of the study is to gather enough evidence to hopefully reject that boring null hypothesis and say, actually, yes, something is happening here.
And when you see a hypothesis written out formally like this, it all just clicks into place, doesn't it? It's not a vague guess. It's a super clear, testable statement that predicts a specific outcome. It sets the goal for the entire research project.
All right, so you've got your variables, you've got your hypothesis. Now what? Well, now you need a plan, a blueprint for how you're actually going to conduct your study. And that's what we call the research design.
And there are a bunch of different blueprints to choose from. A descriptive design just paints a picture of what's going on. Correlational looks for relationships like, does more time studying relate to better grades? Experimental and quasi-experimental designs are for testing cause and effect. And the true experiment with random assignment is kind of the gold standard. Finally, a longitudinal design is like a movie. It follows the same people over a long time to see how they change.
Now, here's a really important reality check. In a field like education, you can't always do that perfect gold standard experiment. I mean, you can't just randomly assign kids to different classrooms. The school would never go for it. So researchers have to adapt. They often use quasi-experimental designs, where they work with the groups that already exist, like 2 different 5th grade classes. It's a super common and really valuable tool for real-world research.
Okay, so we've gone from the big, abstract philosophy all the way down to the nitty-gritty building blocks. Let's zoom back out and bring it all home. Why does any of this matter? What's the big takeaway?
And this is really it. The whole point of this entire system is to move us beyond anecdotes, beyond opinions, beyond, well, I think. It gives us a framework for finding answers that are objective, that we can apply more broadly, and that other people can check for themselves. It's about building knowledge we can actually rely on.
But, and this is a really big but, it is just one lens for looking at the world. It's an incredibly powerful lens for answering questions of what and how many, but it often struggles to answer the deep question of why. The most amazing insights, the most complete truths, almost always come when we take the hard data from quantitative research and combine it with other ways of knowing.